Welcome back to the Glass Alibi.
It is good to be back.
Usually when we sit down to do these deep dives, we're looking at a case from the outside in. We are, analyzing evidence, timelines, motives, trying to figure out who done it.
hmm
But the story we're tackling today, it's different. It's not just a crime story. I mean, it is, but it's a story that forces you to look at your own mind, your own history, and question the one thing you think you can trust the most.
Your own memory.
Exactly, your own memory.
It really is the ultimate nightmare scenario. And I don't just mean the crime itself, which is absolutely horrific, but the aftermath. We're looking at a case study that, it effectively dismantled our entire understanding of eyewitness testimony.
We're talking about the foundational case of Ronald Cotton and Jennifer Thompson Canino.
That's the one.
This is the case that quite honestly kept me up last night. Because you have a victim who wasn't just pretty sure, she was absolutely 100% certain she had identified the man who attacked her.
Total sir.
And you have a judicial system that worked exactly as it was designed to work. There were no corrupt cops, no planted evidence, just procedure followed to the letter. And yet
an innocent man lost 11 years of his life because of it.
it's that core tension, isn't it? That terrifying paradox.
It is. You don't need a villain in the system for the system to destroy a life. You just need the fallibility of the human brain. And if you think, you know how memory works. If you think that when you see something, your brain records it like a video camera and stores it away on a hard drive.
Which is what most of us assume, right?
It is. And this deep dive is going to fundamentally dismantle that belief.
So our mission today is to unpack the narrative of July 1984. But we're not just doing true crime here. We want to use this story as a lens to understand the mechanics of error.
Precisely. We are going to look at the specific psychological mechanisms at play. We're going to talk about the fragility of memory, the concept of the relative judgment process, and the other race effect.
These sound like academic terms.
They are, but they aren't just academic terms.
Mm.
In this story, they are the gears that ground an innocent man into dust. And then, crucially, we're going to look at the systemic reforms that were born from this tragedy.
And we'll wrap up with the incredible, the unlikely friendship that formed afterwards. It's a real roller coaster.
It really is.
So let's rewind. Let's set the scene. Take us back to Burlington, North Carolina. It's July 1984.
Okay, so it's a very specific atmosphere. It's a classic southern summer night. Hot, humid, sticky, the kind of heat that just hangs in the air even after the sun goes down. The air feels heavy.
Right. And we meet Jennifer Thompson. She's 22 years old. She's a college student, 4.0 GPA. She's essentially the model of a reliable observer.
Absolutely. Sharp, organized, has her whole life mapped out. And she's asleep in her off-campus apartment.
And this is where the nightmare begins. According to the accounts from 60 Minutes and her own memoir, Picking Cotton, a man shatters the porch light.
Right. He cuts the phone wires, and then he breaks in.
Let's just pause on that detail about the wires for a second. That creates this immediate sense of isolation. It implies calculation.
Oh, for sure. This wasn't a random stumble in by someone who was drunk. This is a predator who knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to ensure she had no lifeline to the outside world.
No way to call for help.
Exactly. So he enters the apartment and he holds a knife to Jennifer's throat. And in that moment, Jennifer does what most of us would hope we'd be able to do. She goes into survival mode.
She tries to bargain, right?
She does. She initially offers him money, her car, anything to get him to leave.
But he refuses. He tells her, I don't want your money.
And that's when the reality shifts. That's the moment she realizes the intent is sexual assault. But this is where Jennifer does something extraordinary. She makes a conscious pivot in her brain.
This is the part that's so fascinating.
It is. She described it later as treating the assault like an exam.
Like an exam, that's such a specific, student-like way to process trauma.
It is. She tells herself, if I survive, I will make sure he is caught.
That mindset is crucial to understanding everything that happened later. She wasn't just a passive victim in her own mind. She turned herself into an active witness. She started studying him.
Right. She's actively trying to memorize details. She's looking at the hairline, the shape of the face, the voice. She is scanning for scars, tattoos, anything distinct she can grab onto.
She is forcing her brain to encode this data under the most extreme stress imaginable.
She's essentially telling her brain, do not forget this face. She's trying to burn it onto a hard drive, assuming that if she focuses hard enough, the image will be permanent and perfect.
And she notices things, specific things.
She does. She pays attention to the texture of his hair,
Mhm.
She notices he has smooth skin. She listens to the way he speaks. She is gathering evidence before the crime is even over.
And then, after the assault, she manages to trick him.
An incredible moment of clarity. She tells him she needs to get a drink of water, and then she escapes out the back door.
It's just an incredibly brave escape. She survives, and immediately her plan goes into action. She meets Detective Mike Golden at the hospital.
And she tells him essentially, I know who did this. I studied him. She's confident because she made an effort to be confident. She believes she has the answers because she did the homework during the attack.
So they sit down to create a composite sketch. Now, I've seen these sketches before, and usually they look kind of generic, like cartoons.
They can, yeah. But she pores over the features, noses, eyes, ears. She is determined to get this right.
And the sketch she produces is remarkably detailed. It goes out to the public.
And tips start coming in. One of those tips points to a local man.
A man named Ronald Cotton.
Right.
So let's talk about Ronald for a second. He's 22, same age as Jennifer. He works at a restaurant near the scene of the crime.
And crucially for the police, he has a prior record.
That's the key, isn't it?
It is. He had a teenage guilty plea for breaking and entering and sexual assault. So, in the eyes of law enforcement, this makes him a viable suspect. He fits the profile, he's in the area, and he resembles the sketch.
It's a confirmation bias kicking in from the very beginning for the investigators.
Absolutely. They see a guy who fits this sketch and has a record, and the tunnel vision starts to set in. The investigation shifts from who did this to, is it Ronald Cotton?
And this brings us to the identification process. This is where the psychology gets really, really heavy.
It starts with a photo lineup. Just 3 days after the attack, the police show Jennifer 6 photos.
And Jennifer describes this process just like she described the attack, like she's taking a test. She said it felt like the SATs.
That analogy is so telling, isn't it? When you take a multiple choice test, what do?
You use the process of elimination.
Exactly. You say it's not A, it's not B. You're discounting the ones that are definitely wrong to improve your odds on the ones that might be right.
You're looking for the rightest answer among the options you're given.
That's the key phrase, among the options. So she starts discounting faces. She narrows it down. She spends 5 minutes, which is actually a very long time in this context, studying the final 2 photos. And finally, she picks Ronald Cotton's photo.
And here we have the first critical moment of error, though nobody knew it at the time. The detective asks a simple question.
He asks, "Are you sure?"
Just, are you sure?
That question seems so innocent. It seems responsible even. But in the landscape of memory, it invites a solidification of certainty. She's made a choice, and now she's being asked to back that choice. Human beings have this natural desire to be consistent.
Right. Once we state an opinion or make a choice, we unconsciously dig in to defend it.
Exactly. But it doesn't stop at the photos. They arrest Ronald on August 1st, 1984.
And he's completely confused. He asks for what? He tries to give an alibi, but, and this is something that could happen to any of us, he mixes up his weekends.
He gives a detailed account of where he was, but the dates are off. So to the police, who are already looking at him as the perpetrator,
It looks like deception.
it looks like a lie. It confirms their bias.
So they put him in a physical lineup. He's number 5. And the description of Ronald in this lineup, it just breaks my heart. He's terrified. He's trembling, shaking.
Of course he is. He's an innocent man accused of a horrific crime. So Jennifer is behind the glass. She asks for numbers 4 and 5 to step forward again.
Again, the comparison. She's comparing them.
She's comparing them. And she picks number 5, Ronald Cotton.
Okay, now this is the moment. This is the hinge the whole case swings on.
It is. After she picks Ronald, the detective says something to her.
He says, that's the same person you picked out in the photo lineup.
That is the same person you picked out in the photo lineup. That single sentence is a psychological nuclear bomb.
And Jennifer said later that in that moment she thought, bingo, I did it right.
I did it right. She viewed it as passing the test. But scientifically, what happened is called confirming feedback. We're going to dive deeper into this later, but effectively, that comment cemented the image of Ronald Cotton over her actual memory of the attacker.
It's like saving a new file over an old one. The original file is just gone. It's been replaced by this new confirmed version.
Precisely. The tentative memory becomes concrete fact. The malleability of her memory hardened into absolute certainty because of that external validation. She isn't remembering the crime scene anymore.
She's remembering the lineup and the validation she got.
Yes, she's remembering being right.
So now we go to trial, and the prosecution feels like they have a slam dunk.
Well, of course they do. They have the holy grail of criminal justice.
Hmm.
A credible, sympathetic, absolutely certain eyewitness. Jennifer Thompson points to Ronald Cotton in the courtroom and says, Ronald Cotton was Ronald Cotton. There's zero doubt in her voice.
And they also had some physical evidence, right? It wasn't just her word against his.
They did, but it was all circumstantial.
Right.
And I mean very circumstantial. They found a flashlight in Cotton's home that resembled the one used by the attacker.
Resembled.
And they found rubber from his tennis shoe that was consistent with rubber found at the crime scene.
Consistent with is such a dangerous phrase. It doesn't mean match. It just means it's the same type of mass-produced shoe rubber that thousands of people might have.
Exactly. But to a jury, you combine that with that pointing finger from the victim, and it looks like a mountain of evidence. Ronald's family testifies that he was asleep at home, but because he messed up the dates of his alibi earlier, the jury just doesn't buy it.
And the jury deliberates for only 40 minutes
40 minutes.
to decide a man's life.
They find him guilty, sentenced to life plus 54 years.
And for Jennifer, she feels relief. She feels justice has been served. She later said she viewed Ronald as a monster. She prayed for him to die in prison. She wanted him to suffer.
Meanwhile, Ronald is in shock. He's in his cell, crying into his pillow, just wishing he could hug his mother. It's a complete bifurcation of reality. You have the victim believing she is safe, and the innocent man living an absolute nightmare.
But the story doesn't end there. There's a second trial in 1987.
Right. The first conviction was overturned on a technicality. It was about evidence regarding a second victim that had been excluded.
And while Ronald is in prison waiting for this retrial, he meets another inmate, a man named Bobby Poole.
And this is where it gets just cinematic. Ronald looks at Bobby Poole and sees, well, he sees the composite sketch.
Not himself, but the sketch of the attacker.
Exactly. The resemblance is uncanny. Other inmates are constantly confusing them. They look remarkably alike. And the word on the cell block is that Bobby Poole has been bragging.
Bragging about what?
He's confessed to other inmates that he committed the crimes Ronald is in for.
So Ronald's lawyers do something pretty dramatic. They manage to get Bobby Poole into the courtroom during the retrial. They stand him up right in front of Jennifer Thompson.
Imagine that scene. Just put yourself there. You have the man you know as your attacker, Ronald Cotton. You've identified him 3 times now. And then they bring in this new guy, Bobby Poole.
And Jennifer is asked if this new man is the attacker.
And she looks at Bobby Poole, the actual rapist, and she feels nothing. No spark of recognition, no fear, no, wait a minute, nothing. She confidently states he is not the attacker. She points back to Ronald Cotton.
And Ronald is convicted again?
This time it's 2 life sentences. It cemented the idea that Ronald was the guy. I mean, if the victim sees the real guy and rejects him, the jury's going to follow her lead every single time.
So how does this happen? How does a 4.0 GPA student who made a conscious effort to study her attacker look at the real guy and feel nothing, but look at an innocent man and feel 100% certainty? This is where we have to get into the science of error.
Okay, so let's unpack this because it's a perfect storm of cognitive biases and memory flaws. We have to start with the work of Elizabeth Loftus. She is the titan of memory research. Her work fundamentally changed how we understand recall.
She's the one who says memory isn't a video recorder, right?
That's her core finding. Most people think memory is like a file you pull up from a computer. You view it, and you put it back unchanged. Loftus showed us that memory is reconstructive.
Reconstructive? What does that mean exactly?
It means that every time you pull up a memory, you're rebuilding it. You're piecing it together from fragments. And in that rebuilding process, it is susceptible to suggestion, to contamination, to editing.
So when Jennifer was looking at the photo lineup, she wasn't just accessing a file, she was actively editing the file.
Yes. The memory of the attacker's face was being overwritten by the memory of the photo of Ronald Cotton. And then that was overwritten and reinforced by the physical lineup. By the time she got to trial, she wasn't remembering the attack anymore.
She was remembering the lineup.
Exactly. The source of the face in her mind had shifted from the crime scene to the police station. The memory became a memory of an identification, not a memory of a crime.
That is terrifying, because to her, it feels like the absolute truth.
It feels indistinguishable from the truth. Then you add in the second major factor, the concept of the relative judgment process, championed by researcher Gary Wells.
This is the multiple choice thing we touched on earlier.
Right, and Wells's research showed that when the actual perpetrator is not in the lineup, what we call an offender-absent lineup, witnesses don't just say none of the above.
They feel like they have to pick someone.
They do. There's an implicit pressure. And they tend to pick the person who looks most like their memory compared to the others.
It's comparative shopping. It's not, is this the guy? It's, which of these guys is the closest match?
You've nailed it. Jennifer wasn't comparing the men in the lineup to her memory of the attacker, as much as she was comparing them to each other to find the best match. And since Bobby Poole wasn't there, Ronald Cotton looked the most like Bobby Poole out of everyone present.
So he wins the looks most like the rapist contest, and that translates in her mind to he is the rapist.
Correct. Now, layer on top of that another critical element, the other race effect, or ORE.
Jennifer was white. Ronald Cotton and Bobby Poole were both black.
Correct. And statistically, this is huge. According to the Innocence Project, something like 40% of all DNA exonerations that involved wrongful identification were cross-racial cases.
So is this just about racism or prejudice?
It's actually more complex than that. It seems to be a cognitive processing deficit. The YASA lab at Johns Hopkins did some fascinating research on this. They used a morphing game.
Okay, a morphing game. How does that work?
They showed participants faces that were digitally morphed to be slightly different. And they found that participants could detect very small differences, like a 20% deviation in faces of their own race. But when looking at faces of another race, they needed a 50% deviation to notice a difference.
Wow. So the brain is literally less efficient at encoding the specific individuating details of faces from other races.
Yeah, inefficient is the perfect word. MRI scans show widespread differences in brain activity when we're encoding same race versus other race faces. We just don't process the nuances deeply unless we have a lot of experience and exposure. So for Jennifer, the distinction between Cotton and Poole, which might look obvious to someone else, was cognitively blurred.
And then you pour the concrete on top of all this with the confirming feedback.
The bingo I did it right moment. There was a landmark study on this where subjects viewed a shaky video of a staged crime. They made a guess at the suspect from a lineup. If the person administering the lineup said, "Good, you picked the suspect," the witness's confidence skyrocketed to nearly 100%.
And didn't they also claim they had a better view than they actually did?
Yes. That's the most incredible part. They retrospectively edited the conditions of the memory itself. They would say things like, "The lights were brighter, I was closer, I studied him for a longer period of time." Their confidence rewrote their memory of the event.
So Jennifer went from, it's between 4 and 5 to, I am absolutely certain, because the system fed her confidence back to her.
It's a perfect storm. The relative judgment, the cross-racial processing issues, and the police reinforcement. Ronald Cotton didn't stand a chance.
You really didn't.
Not against the machinery of the human mind.
So Ronald is in prison. It's the mid-90s now. A decade has passed. And something happens on TV that changes everything.
The O.J. Simpson trial.
Of all things.
Ronald is listening to the trial on the radio or watching snippets on TV in prison, and he keeps hearing about this new sort of magic bullet. DNA evidence.
It's 1995. This is the dawn of the DNA era in forensics. So Ronald contacts his lawyer and begs for a DNA test on the old evidence from his case.
And this is a high-stakes gamble. It really is. His lawyer warns him, if the DNA matches you, you are sunk forever. Any chance of parole is gone.
But Ronald knows he didn't do it. He's been screaming it for a decade. He insists.
And incredibly, they find the rape kit. The vaginal swab and the underwear had been preserved for 10 years in a police storage room. They run the PCR testing. It excludes Ronald Cotton. He's not the source of the DNA.
That must have been the most incredible moment. But it gets even better. They run the DNA profile from the crime scene against the database of violent felons.
And it matches Bobby Poole.
The man Jennifer looked at in the courtroom and said, I've never seen him before in my life.
The man who was practically Ronald's twin in the eyes of the other inmates. The man who had been bragging about the crime.
June 30, 1995. Ronald Cotton is cleared of all charges. He served 10.5 years. He gets a governor's pardon and eventually some compensation, about $110,000, which frankly seems pitiable for a decade of a man's life.
It's nothing. And Bobby Poole, faced with the DNA, eventually pleads guilty. So justice finally is served. But this leaves Jennifer in a complete crisis.
Oh, I can't even imagine. Imagine being Jennifer Thompson. You have built your recovery, your sense of justice, your feeling of safety on the fact that you put a monster away.
And now the science tells you that you put an innocent man in a cage and you let the real monster roam free to hurt other people.
She said she felt suffocating, debilitating shame. She described her reality shattering. She struggled to accept it at first. She just kept saying, it can't be true.
It's the death of her entire narrative. The story she told herself to survive. But this leads us to the most remarkable part of this story, the part about restorative justice.
Jennifer could have hidden. She could have just moved away, changed her name, tried to forget. But 2 years later, in 1997, she asks to meet Ronald.
They meet at a local church. This isn't a courtroom. It's neutral spiritual ground.
And Jennifer describes herself as trembling, just terrified. She tells him that a lifetime of apologies wouldn't be enough.
And Ronald does something superhuman. He takes her hands and he says, I forgive you.
I forgive you after everything.
He tells her he doesn't want her to look over her shoulder anymore. He wants her to heal.
This brings up the concept of restorative justice. Usually we think of the legal system as just punishment, prison, an eye for an eye. But this is something completely different.
It is. Academic researchers like Pawama and Page discuss this case as restorative justice in its purest form. And the reason is because it was spontaneous. It wasn't a state-mandated program where you check a box and go through the motions.
Right.
The system usually steals the conflict. The state becomes the victim, effectively, in the prosecution. But here, Jennifer and Ronald took the conflict back.
They took ownership of the resolution themselves.
Exactly. The forgiveness allowed Jennifer's healing to finally begin. And for Ronald, his anger, which he had every right to hold on to for the rest of his life, it dissipated.
And they became best friends. I mean, literally close friends. Their families spend time together. They co-authored that book, Picking Cotton.
It's incredible. Ronald said in an interview, I don't have a faith of the rapist. Bobby Poole is dead. Ronald Cotton is my friend.
That's just profound. But it also highlights that while they found personal peace, the system itself needed to learn from its failure. Which brings us to the reforms.
Because we can't rely on every innocent man being as gracious as Ronald Cotton or every victim being as brave and self-reflective as Jennifer. We need to stop this from happening in the first place.
So the lesson is that innocent people are convicted. The system is not infallible. So what changed?
Based on this case and the research we've been discussing, there were a series of specific reforms that were pushed across the country.
Okay, let's list them. First, double-blind administration.
This is absolutely critical. It means the officer conducting the lineup must not know who the suspect is.
Why is that so important?
To prevent that subconscious cueing we talked about. No leaning forward when the witness looks at number 5. No subtle nods of encouragement, and certainly no, bingo, you picked the same guy. If the officer doesn't know who the suspect is, they can't influence the witness, even accidentally.
Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, sequential presentation.
This directly attacks the relative judgment problem. Instead of showing 6 photos at once, where you're encouraged to compare them to each other, you show them one at a time. Photo 1, yes or no. Photo 2, yes or no.
So it forces absolute judgment. You have to compare the photo in front of you to your memory, not to the other photos on the page.
Precisely. Now, there is some debate here. Some police departments push back, arguing it slightly reduces the number of hits on the actual bad guys, too. But the data overwhelmingly suggests it significantly reduces false positives, which is the whole point.
Okay, third reform, witness instructions.
This one is so simple. It's mandating that police tell the witness. The perpetrator may or may not be present in this lineup.
That removes the pressure to pick someone. It gives them explicit permission to say none of the above.
Yes, it tells them that I don't see him here is a perfectly acceptable and correct answer.
And finally, recording confidence immediately.
Documenting the witness's confidence level immediately at the time of identification before any feedback can inflate it. If Jennifer had been asked her confidence level right after that first photo lineup, she might have said, I'm 50% sure it's one of these two.
And that would have looked very different to a jury than the 100% certain she felt at trial a year later.
A world of difference. Now, you'd think every police department in the country would adopt these immediately.
But that's not the case, is it?
No. Change is slow. You look at something like the Wisconsin model, which was an attempt to get police buy-in from the bottom up, rather than just passing laws from the top down. Because police often view blind requirements as an insult to their integrity.
They say, I'm not going to rig the lineup.
Exactly. But it isn't about conscious integrity. It's about subconscious bias. It's about human nature. Even the most honest detective in the world can accidentally cue a witness.
So where does this leave us? I mean, what's the big takeaway from this whole journey?
I think it's that we have come a long way since 1984. DNA exposed the cracks in the foundation of our justice system. We know now that eyewitness testimony, while incredibly powerful to a jury, is not evidence in the same way a fingerprint is.
It's more like trace evidence.
That's a great way to put it. It's fragile. It degrades over time, and it can be contaminated by the very process we use to collect it.
And the cost of ignoring that fragility is catastrophic. Ronald Cotton lost his entire 20s. Jennifer Thompson lived with a decade of misplaced hate and then a lifetime of crushing guilt.
But they also gave us a roadmap out of the woods. Their advocacy, their friendship, it has changed laws. It has changed how police are trained. It has saved other innocent people from the same fate.
It really is a story of science and grace, hand in hand.
It really is.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one last thought. We talked a lot about how Jennifer's memory was rewritten by a few simple words from a detective. That's the same person.
Right.
If our most traumatic, most vivid memories, the ones we feel are burned into our brains, can be edited so easily, how much of your own past is fact? And how much is a story you've unknowingly edited over the years? Every time you tell a story about your childhood at a dinner party, are you remembering the event, or are you just remembering the last time you told the story?
And in a justice system that still relies so heavily on us telling those fragile stories, how many other Bobby Pools are still out there because we were all just too confident in our own eyes?
That is a chilling thought to end on. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the Ronald Cotton case.
Stay curious and question everything.
See you next time on The Glass Alibi.